Welcome back to you then. We're live from Paris on France 24. The main headlines on the programme for you today. Opposition, including from senior Conservative lawmakers to Theresa May's new Brexit plan, appears to harden as commentators say she has no chance of getting it through the UK Parliament. As she prepares to face MPs again later today, many saying she should go on Monday after what are expected to be dismal European election results. And we'll hear from our correspondent in London very shortly. 6 people killed, according to the authorities, and more than 200 wounded in clashes in Indonesia. Dozens also arrested in protests against the re-election of President Joko Widodo. Some opposition members, though, saying those figures have been exaggerated. And the UN is warned that Libya is on the verge of descending into civil war that could divide the country and imperil the security of its neighbours. Good to have you with us, and we're live from Paris here on France 24. I'm Stuart Norval. Also coming up for you, from Brexit to Frexit. In today's Europe Report in 15 minutes, we're going to be digesting the claim that 40% of French people want to quit the European Union. Is it true? And selling off the country's riches, the Mexican president auctioning off a 2007 Lamborghini that you can just about see there, and a series as well of bulletproof cars to give the money to the country's poorest townships. So she called it then the last chance to end the UK's political deadlock and to deliver Brexit. She told them it was a new Brexit deal that Britain must now rally behind. She almost pleaded with lawmakers to support her new plans. The signs, though, for Theresa May, not good. The main opposition parties making it clear they will not support her plans. Even more tellingly, one by one, a series of her own lawmakers also speaking out against it. And now, as she prepares to face MPs again later, many commentators suggesting a new vote on her deal will never be held at all. And she'll be forced to go after what are expected to be dismal European election results for the Conservatives on Monday. Well, let's have the very latest from London. Here's our correspondent, Benedict Pavier.
In this new deal, as she calls it, on Brexit, trying to find that common ground in Parliament, the Prime Minister is saying that if MPs in the House of Commons vote in that first week of June, when she's going to bring this EU withdrawal bill to the House of Commons, if they vote in favour of it, if after 3 times of rejecting the deal that she negotiated with the EU, if this legislation passes, then it will be up to MPs to decide whether the people of the United Kingdom would have another referendum. But of course, we don't know what the question would be and how that would be phrased. Would it be, for example, her deal on the table against revoking, or would it be against a no deal? Very difficult to tell where this is going. What I can tell you is that we've had lots and lots of reaction already to this speech this afternoon. We've got Brexiteer MPs who've said this is absolutely unacceptable for them, even thinking about a second referendum, which, of course, the Prime Minister underlined again today. She is against. She wants to deliver the first result of, the result of that first referendum back in 2016. You've got the Labour Party leader, Jeremy Corbyn, saying that the Labour Party won't vote for it, that it's a rehash, besides the fact that it's probably not deliverable at all because she's going to be quitting. You've got the SNP's Nicola Sturgeon saying she's against it. You've got the DUP saying they won't vote for it. You've got the Liberal Democrats saying they won't vote for it either. And when you think of this whole problem, and the arithmetic will not change in the House of Commons, a House of Commons that is mostly, yes, a Remain chamber, it is very worrying and does not bode well. Of course, we've got the European elections this Thursday with the results on Sunday evening before that. So a very big gamble that at the moment doesn't look like it will pay off in that first week of June.
Benedict Pavier, a correspondent there in London. Well, the man who's taken much of the wind out of her sails, if you like, is the former UKIP leader, Nigel Farage. Now, he started a brand new Brexit party, which is wide out in front in polls for the European elections at the end of this week. Last night, they held a packed final rally, as Peter O'Brien reports.
Back in a big way. The Brexit Party's final rally before European Parliament elections is packed to the brim, and Nigel Farage gets a rock star's welcome.
We've managed in 5.5 weeks not just to frighten the establishment. Oh no, they're not frightened. They're absolutely terrified.
Their plan, once they've crushed the competition and taken dozens of seats, demand places on the EU negotiating team for Brexit and make sure it happens. Despite being created just months ago, latest polling estimates the Brexit Party will take more than a third of the vote. It's set to be a big comeback for Nigel Farage. He helped lead the Leave campaign in the UK's 2016 referendum, then he quit the UK Independence Party as it lurched to the anti-Islam far right. His ultimate aim is not just to leave the EU, however. He's looking to end Britain's two-party system in favour of a new political arrangement and carve himself out a leading role.
This is now about far more than leaving the European Union. This is now about a bigger, more fundamental question of democracy.
To leave.
Farage has run unsuccessfully for the UK's Parliament 7 times, but with the Conservative and Labour parties in disarray over Brexit, his vision for a new political landscape might just have a chance.
I don't know about a project of
6 people have been killed, according to the authorities, and 200 wounded in Indonesia as dozens of people were arrested in what were violent protests on the streets of Jakarta last night there. You can see live images, in fact, of the latest from Jakarta behind me there. Tear gas was fired to disperse thousands of people taking part in a rally opposed to the re-election of President Joko Widodo. Some, though, in Jakarta saying those figures have been exaggerated for political purposes. It came, though, as 30,000 troops were stationed right across the capital as the country's election commission released official results that confirmed Widodo had won. This report now from Solange Mujan.
Setting up a human barricade after a night of violent post-election clashes. Tens of thousands of Indonesian riot police closed ranks in Jakarta, tightening security and blocking the route of protesters. Hours earlier in the streets of the capital, rioters threw rocks and Molotov cocktails, and security forces responded with rubber bullets and tear gas. The violent and fatal clashes came after Indonesia's Elections Commission announced a day earlier than expected that President Joko Widodo had won a second term with 55.5% of the vote. A tally his opponent, former General Prabowo Subianto, contests. His supporters say there's been massive election fraud.
The cheating has been going on since the beginning, and the announcement, which was supposed to be on the 22nd of May, suddenly happened on the 21st at midnight, when people were sleeping. This is also a form of cheating. It is possible that they wanted to cover something up.
Prior to the announcement, an election supervisory agency had already dismissed claims of systemic cheating, citing a lack of proof. And independent observers also say the April 17th poll was fair and free. In his victory speech, President Widodo called for peace, promising to represent all Indonesians.
We've gone through election after election with maturity. God willing, we can accomplish the current election in peace.
Meanwhile, Prabowo's campaign team vowed to contest the result in the country's highest court, while tensions remain high in the streets of the world's third largest democracy.
Abortion rights activists have protested across the US against Republican-led efforts to restrict access to abortion, a drive that they fear will end with a challenge to the 1973 US Supreme Court ruling legalizing the practice. This is the protests in New York, in fact, nearly a week after the southern state of Alabama passed the country's toughest ban, prohibiting abortion in all cases, even rape and incest, unless the mother's life is at risk. Alabama, among more than a dozen states which have adopted laws banning or drastically curtailing access to abortion. Anchor Ula reports.
We will not go back!
From North Carolina to California, Tennessee, Kentucky, Florida, and all the way to the Supreme Court. Abortion rights activists held a day of action on Tuesday to protest the Republican-led campaign to outlaw the procedure. They were joined by lawyers, health professionals, and politicians.
Republican legislatures are waging a war to unravel a woman's fundamental rights. They are responsible for 300 newly proposed restrictions. We are here to send these folks a message. Not on our watch.
8 states have recently passed legislation restricting abortion. The most extreme law was passed in Alabama last week. It bans abortion under every circumstance, including pregnancies resulting from rape or incest. Protesters fear these laws will spark a legal battle that will make it all the way up the federal court system to the Supreme Court. Stacked with conservative justices, the court could overturn the landmark Roe v. Wade case, which legalized abortion nationally in 1973.
I think that the religious right and the extremists in the Republican Party have worked together over probably decades to build the momentum to be able to achieve this. I think that Donald Trump coming into the White House was kind of their signal that now was the time. With him,
Donald Trump, for his part, recently said he's against abortion, except in cases of rape or incest, or if the mother's life is in danger.
I'll bow to no man's word.
Thousands of people, many of them students, have taken part in new mass protests in Algeria to support a radical change of the regime. The protesters calling for the resignations of the interim president and prime minister and rejecting presidential elections, which are scheduled for July the 4th. The United States says it's seeing signs that the Syrian government may be using chemical weapons, including an alleged chlorine attack on Sunday in northwest Syria. Now, that's according to the State Department, as it warned that Washington and its allies would respond quickly and appropriately if it were proven. The US saying it's still gathering information on the alleged attack in the Idlib area of the country. That comes as the Syria Justice and Accountability Centre has published an analysis of classified documents it says provide a rare window into the day-to-day operations of Syria's secret security institutions. Now, that includes detention and surveillance practices aimed at brutally cracking down on the 2011 uprising and the names of officials ultimately responsible for atrocities. The Washington-based centre saying it's the first time an analysis of classified documents from Syria's security sector has been made public.
How the Syrian government dealt with the 2011 uprising. Do the necessary. That meant more surveillance and more arrests, says the SJAC. The documents it analysed came from 7 state security agencies. The SJAC says the documents show how security agencies relied on informants. They wanted to know who was behind the protests and discourage Syrians from taking part.
The term "do the necessary" was the mere order leaders of security agencies or leaders of branches were giving to their subordinate officers. It's an open card or an open invitation for officers to use whatever they want, and power, including lethal power.
Thousands of videos like this one emerged online that could not be independently verified at the time. But they appeared to show the security forces doing the necessary to crack down on protesters. So what will happen to the documents now? The SJAC believes they could be used as evidence of human rights violations, crimes against humanity, and since the armed conflict began, possible violations of the laws of war.
And you'll find out much more about that on our website, france24.com. Special report on that site at the moment on that story, so do log on to that if you can. Now, Libya is on the verge of descending into civil war that could divide the country and imperil the security of its neighbours and the whole of the Mediterranean region. Now, that's the warning from the UN envoy for Libya speaking to the Security Council. He called for immediate action to cut off arms flows fueling that ongoing fighting, which has intensified after General Khalifa Haftar launched his offensive on Tripoli at the beginning of April. Here's the latest.
The outskirts of Tripoli, violent clashes rage. In the worst fighting since the start of Ramadan earlier this month. In these images, the forces of the UN-recognized GNA, or Government of National Accord, are trying to push back an offensive by the LNA, the Libyan National Army, which is backed by Egypt and the United Arab Emirates. An escalation of violence that the UN envoy to Libya warned could mean a long and bloody war is ahead.
Libya is on the verge of descending into a civil war, which could lead to the permanent division of the country. The damage already done will take years to mend, and that's only if the war is ended now.
6 weeks ago, the LNA's commander, Khalifa Haftar, launched an assault on the capital, the base of the internationally recognized government. Since then, the flare-up of violence has been taking its toll. More than 75,000 people have been displaced, and at least 510 have been killed, according to the World Health Organization. Ghassan Salameh called for immediate action to cut off the flow of arms that are fueling the clashes.
The amount and sophistication of these weapons are already causing greater numbers of casualties. Some nations are fueling this bloody conflict. The United Nations should put an end to it.
The UN Security Council failed to agree last month on a draft resolution demanding a ceasefire in Libya. After meeting with Libyan Prime Minister earlier this month, French President Emmanuel Macron is slated to meet next with Commander Haftar in another push to cease the violence that's raged in Libya since the fall of Muammar Gaddafi.
Now then, if you're a president, some might say you've got enough power, influence, also a fair share of luxury. Well, that certainly seems to be the view of the Mexican president, Andrés Manuel López Obrador. Not only has he moved out of the sprawling president's residence, but he's also putting a whole series of luxury goods in the country up for sale in an auction this weekend. Lots actually include a 2007 Lamborghini, which you can just kind of see underneath that tarpaulin there. It's worth around $73,000. There are also a series of bulletproof cars. As for the money, well, proceeds are going to go to two of Mexico's poorest townships. I wonder how much they'll raise in that auction at the weekend. Main headlines on Live from Paris now. Opposition, including from senior Conservative lawmakers to Theresa May's new Brexit plan, appears to harden as commentators say she has little chance of getting it through the UK Parliament as she prepares to face MPs later today. Many saying she should go on Monday after what are expected to be dismal European election results. And 6 people killed, according to the authorities there anyway, and more than 200 wounded in clashes in Indonesia. Some opposition groups, though, already starting to say those figures could be exaggerated for political purposes.